And welcome to the Horizon Roundtable podcast. This is episode 0. We are just starting this out. We'll be featured regularly starting at the beginning of the year by way of 4lights.fm. I'm Bob McDonald. I write the Cleveland State column for More Than the Fan Cleveland. You can catch me on Twitter at Bob McDonald, or you can catch me every week on cleveland.morethanthefan.net. And with me is Jimmy Lemke.
How's it going?
No. And Jimmy, of course, is the well, you can go ahead and introduce yourself, sir.
Well, I guess what I would say is I am a 2010 grad of the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. I have since 2009, after a 4-year stint as the sports editor of the UWM Post, circulation 12,000 on campus at Milwaukee. I started the website PantherU.com, and I've been running it for about 6 years since. We don't really have a whole lot of coverage in local media, whether we're talking about television, radio, or obviously in print. So I kind of took it upon myself to make sure that the Milwaukee Panthers got some coverage, and we've done a pretty good job. I've been proud of almost everything that we've been able to do with Panther U, and I'm really looking forward to this podcast because we've always wanted to do something based around the whole Horizon League. This is my 10th year being a part of this conference as a fan, and just about every team out there, I know them backwards and forwards. It's a good thing to know, about programs over, a long, a decade worth of, watching and listening and taking in all the games. And I'm really glad that this podcast is starting because the Horizon League definitely needs more fan engagement, especially since, we're heading into this neutral site tournament this year for the first time in a long time. And I think it's time, and I'm glad that I can be a part of it.
All right. 10 years. I've been with it since Cleveland State joined in 94. So thanks for making me feel old.
Well, I'm only 28, so it's hard to show a whole lot of experience.
No, but I remember the changeover. It was from the Midwestern Collegiate Conference to the Horizon League. That was a fun thing.
Did you like that change?
You know what? I was in the middle of that. Was right during the tail end of the Rolly Massimino era, so I was a little preoccupied with him.
Yeah, I guess he wasn't too great of a coach for you guys.
Well, he did as he unfortunate as his record was, I will say, and the fact that I pretty much spent a year and a half dedicated to getting rid of him. He actually did bring some good things. I can never. He definitely did bring kind of the spotlight to Cleveland State, and then of course Mike Garland came in and just it all ran away again. So, so the big thing, this just on this trial run, obviously, as you mentioned, Jimmy, we want to get a lot of the these our fellow conference fans engaged. So we'll probably be spending most of this time in subsequent podcasts talking with some people around the league, and I'm sure that they're going to be more than happy to hear from us.
Yeah, I really love to get a few people involved. I really want to get Brian Dickman up from Green Bay on. I'd like to get, Oakland's got a bunch of guys that would be around. There's a lot of people around the conference that I would love to get involved with this. I'm sure that we could get a couple beat writers from local newspapers. Paul Oren will probably listen to this because he's got nothing better to do during winter break. Nothing going on during winter break,
Well, he's a busy guy. He's at the Times of Northwest Indiana. He's got that, and he's got that. he's got a lot of things on his plate. So
he's a professor, actually. Well, a teacher. I don't know if he's quite a professor. I think I don't know if it's adjunct or if he's just a lecturer, but he's been I think it's journalism that he teaches at Valpo. So
I sincerely hope so. If it was basket weaving, I'd be a little concerned.
Well, little do you know, Paul Oren's actually a master basket weaver, so they're unlucky to not have him be a basket weaving teacher.
All right, well, we can ask him about that when we invite him on. Interesting you mentioned the Oakland guys, because the first thing I do want to talk about today is Oakland going up to Washington and beating them, and Khalil Felder, he scores 38 points, 25 of them in the first half. I mean, if you need any further proof that he's the front runner for the conference player of the year, there it is. There's Exhibit A.
The question that we've had for about 10 years that I've been around, there's a question that comes up fairly frequently is, when you're talking about conference player of the year, are you talking about somebody who's in the 18 game conference season or 16 over the last couple of years, or are we talking about somebody who does the full season? Because sometimes you'll get players who will do very well against conference competition, but because they're playing, maybe a tougher schedule than other teams, they won't do so well in the non-conference year, so their numbers won't be as big. And Khalil Felder is one of the first guys that I can really, and there are a few guys that I can really say he's really killing it either way.
Yeah, he torched everybody last season. I mean, you couldn't go into the arena last season and think you were going to win. I think I can't even remember. I can't even remember if they even won a game, if they even lost a game in conference last year. I think they may have lost one, maybe, at the arena. That place is probably the toughest place to play in the Horizon League. At least it was last year, and it definitely will be this year.
Well, the great thing about the arena is that it's much smaller, and as the Horizon League changes, once we pulled Butler out of the conference, and then Loyola, the name, and Loyola is really a throwaway, but the name team Butler left, so there was a game that pretty much everybody got more people out to that was off the schedule now for the conference, and our attendances have all gone down slightly in the last few years since Butler left. Well, I mean, Cleveland State was pretty much nowhere to begin with, so I don't know how you could go down. But what I'm saying is that we used to have that 5,000. They might still have it. The 5,000 rule.
I believe
home arena.
I thought it was 4,500 actually.
Is it 4,500?
I thought it was for reasons that escape me. I always thought it was 4,500.
They must have gotten rid of it because the arena is much smaller. The arena is a very, very, very small building, so they don't nearly have to come close to filling it for them to really do well. As far as having a home crowd and a home atmosphere, I think the arena only sits about 3,000 people. So when you have, 300 students, that's 10% of the crowd. That's a big student crowd. So, especially when they got games against Detroit. And last year they didn't lose a game in conference at the arena. I'm looking. They beat Valpo up in overtime by 14. How do you outscore somebody by 14 in 5 minutes?
And Valpo, I mean the eventual conference champs. I mean,
yeah, they had a close call with Green Bay. Had a close call with you guys at Cleveland.
Yeah,
they had to get overtime to beat Wright State. But I mean, several close games. But the constant in there is that they won every single one of them.
Exactly.
The Horizon League, all 8 teams had real difficulty getting into Oakland and winning. None of them could do it last year. We'll see if one of them can do it this year, but without with Khalil Felder getting even better. I mean, he was pretty great last year, and this year he's just taking that whole next level. It's going to be really hard to see a team go in there and beat them easily. I think somebody will go in and beat them. I just don't know who it's going to be. They don't have their defensive juggernaut from last year. They're not 100% where they were, but Khalil Felder is so much better.
Yeah,
and that just shows.
We got to start making. I think at this point in time, we could start making comparisons between him and Norris Cole. I think, that's how good Felder is at this point.
They're different players. I mean, Norris was definitely a bigger guard, and I'm not talking about his flat top. I mean, he was just much more of a demanding guy. I don't see Khalil Felder, going out and having 20 rebound performances. You know what I'm saying? Norris
even
Cole,
in terms of dominating the game.
Yeah, on the offensive end, he can just take over. And we've had guards that have been able to score a lot, but 38 points against Washington, that's nothing to shake a stick at.
Not at all. Not at all. I think Lorenzo Romar, the Huskies head coach, had said about the same at last night too. So, but yeah, that's definitely something that pretty much any Horizon League team is gonna have to look out for, because it's always already tough to be in the arena. It's gonna be even tougher with him still on the roster.
Right.
The other thing I wanted to talk about is of course, I'm going to talk about Cleveland State. I got to talk about Cleveland State actually beating Belmont. And this was a team that Cleveland State has pretty much, I don't want to get into the whole, oh dear God, everybody left narrative, because I'm kind of over it now. We're near the end of the non-conference schedule. Let's talk about what we got.
It's over. It's done. Trey Lewis is gone. Anton Grady is gone. Everybody's gone. So let's just not dwell on it.
Except I will dwell on the fact that Anton Grady did come back. He did play yesterday after that really nasty spinal concussion.
Well, we saw that on the TV, on the big screen at the dealership a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
We've got a big old 80-inch screen, and I had the Wichita State game on, and that was a tough hit to take.
Yeah, I didn't see it I didn't even hear about it until like 5 hours after the fact, and I was like, wow. But he's back. But that's my Anton Grady thing. But what Cleveland State has left is nobody's really sure. Even Gary Waters has kind of admitted, I'm not really sure what I got. Right. And what he had yesterday was clearly good enough to beat Belmont. DeMonte Flanagan actually came in and put his team on his back, and he hit that final shot, and that's kind of what Cleveland State has been looking for from DeMonte Flanagan, especially with those heavy, lofty expectations of him. So, but yeah, Cleveland State is playing 2 walk-ons now, giving them big actual minutes, and they're actually doing pretty well. So, hey, free players, my favorite.
Totally.
Yeah.
And Cleveland State, you knew that Gary Waters wasn't going to have a bunch of nobodies out there playing. Mm-hmm. He's always been good recruiting. And obviously there were a couple questions about that because Jason G's gone. You have some of the assistants. I think all of them were gone after this last year.
Yeah,
right?
The only one who was left was Larry DeSempler, but he's been here since the beginning. Cleveland State ended up losing Jermaine Henderson. Jermaine Kimbrough. We got Jermaine Henderson. Jermaine Kimbrough, who is in Nevada now, and Victor Morris, former player. He was the director of basketball operations. He actually left as well. But they brought in Jermaine Henderson, who is the
former G's head coach at Longwood now, right?
Yes, he is. And so because I'm trying to remember who exactly replaced him I think it was who is the gentleman who replaced him? And now his name actually escapes me at this point in time. I'm not sure because he's still on the staff. But yeah, they brought in Henderson. Henderson was kind of the because he was a former assistant at Miami of Ohio.
Okay.
He actually filled in as head coach when Charlie Coles was going through his treatment. He actually, I guess his kind of thing is that the idea is so Gary Waters can start recruiting to all of Ohio because we've been kind of a little compartmentalized between the Cleveland Akron area, but we're not getting a lot of them. But and then we've got this little kind of conclave in Dayton, thanks to Norris Cole and Aaron Pogue, because we've got that kind of that covered. So I think the idea is that Jermaine Henderson is as the assistant, having a lot more knowledge of the having a little bit more juice in Central Ohio and whatnot. I guess that's kind of the thought process there, I guess.
So
I have another theory, though.
What's that?
I think he's I still believe that because Gary Waters' contract is at the end of 2019, and I don't know if this is going to be his last run or not. But if it is, maybe this is possibly grooming Henderson to take over as head coach. Who knows?
If I'm an athletic director, and if I remember correctly, you have the former retared Butler athletic director, right?
Oh yes, John Perry.
John Perry.
Yes, John Perry, who will probably he's got 2 years. He's got 2 years left on his contract, and also will probably never live down the fact that he tried to get rid of wrestling in favor of his pet sport of lacrosse.
So I've actually I was kind of on the side hearing about that, and what happened with that?
Well, here's what happened. It was really no secret that John Perry wanted to bring men's lacrosse in, and I don't really know a lot about men's lacrosse, so I'm like, okay, fine, let's see how this goes. We thought that perhaps he would add in another women's sport and have that, but what ended up happening was at the end of the he made the announcement, and ironically, the announcement was made the same day that Trey Lewis announced he was transferring. That was fun. They announced that lacrosse would be added, and that they weren't getting rid of wrestling per se. They were just defunding it, and they would have to fund themselves. So,
which is a way of saying you're the ones that have to break the bad news, not us.
Yeah. So that was kind of a big. I really did think that was kind of a misstep because the wrestling community revolted. I mean, they totally revolted. I mean, and not just in the Cleveland area, but nationwide. I mean, they all just kind of banded together. And then with probably about 2 weeks after the announcement, Cleveland State's Student Government Association was having their elections, and then they decided to put a measure on the ballot, non-binding, of course, but just kind of a get the message across type of deal. If you're willing to ask students if they'd be willing to pay extra and general fee money to keep wrestling, and they did by a sizable margin. So. And then which is interesting because if you've ever seen a Cleveland State game, it's getting better, but it's in years past you always wondered where all the students were, but it's getting a little better. About a week later, the administration got together and decided, we need to keep wrestling. So with lacrosse, with Cleveland State, they've actually been moving pretty quickly on that. They hired a new head coach, Dylan Sheridan. He's a guy out of the University of Denver, and he's been running all over the place. I mean, his first recruiting class, they 35 of them, I think. I'm sure I'm lowballing it. They all signed in during the fall signing period, and these are guys that aren't even going to start until they're drop the ball until next spring of 2017. So
it's spring of 2017 that they're going to play.
That's right. Yep.
Okay.
Not coincidentally, last spring.
Are you familiar with the sport?
No, and I'm going to have to be at some point. I'm going to have to at some point in time.
The good news is, I mean, my sister lived in Baltimore for a few years, and when I got to visit her a few times, and the lacrosse, the Duke of lacrosse, basically, is not Duke, it's Johns Hopkins.
Yeah.
And I've actually been to a Johns Hopkins lacrosse match, and it's pretty fantastic.
Incidentally, Duke, who also has a pretty good lacrosse team, will probably have something about saying Johns Hopkins is the Duke of lacrosse, though.
Yeah, they probably. Yeah. Johns Hopkins is the one with a lot of the titles.
Yeah.
They're not quite as successful now. They've had a couple years of difficulty, but largely almost the entire Division I is east of the Appalachians. There's only a handful of teams west of there. Ohio State's had a team for a while. Air Force.
Detroit also has one, by the way.
Yeah, some of the new teams west of them include Detroit and Marquette here in Milwaukee. I'm sure you'll end up playing those.
Probably. The interesting thing will end up being where if Cleveland State becomes an independent or they join a conference. I'm assuming that's going to be the next logical step, but I'm sure I'll talk about it at some other time. Speaking of conferences,
yeah,
we got off on that tangent, and then we just talking about the Cleveland State, just the game, the win against Belmont. We got kind of an issue though, and it's more of an issue of underperformance, if you will, because I think everybody was expecting a lot more out of Vinny Zolo than is what is actually happening. I mean, he's getting his rebounds, but that's pretty much it. I mean, the last 3 games, he's like 2 of 23 from the field. 2 of 23. He scored 2 points yesterday, and I think we all pretty much collectively said, "Hey," and those were free throws. Whereas we were thinking, "Hey, a place on the court where you can't miss."
Has he only taken 23 shot attempts this year?
No. That's in the last 3 games.
Oh wow! So he's just having a really cold stretch.
Yeah, Arctic basically. I actually tweeted yesterday. I couldn't remember the last time Vinny Zolo made a layup. I think I should do that again because 2 minutes later he hits a layup, and of course that was his only other score of the game.
Well, sometimes players go through some rough stretches. I mean, our Austinarians, for us, he's a guy that scores double digits a game, and he's had a pretty rough stretch since the Wisconsin game. He went, the Badger fans were giving us crap. You came here and snuck out with a win, had to play the best game you've ever played before, and I'm like, our best 3-point shooter was 1 for 12 from 3, so I don't know if we just squeaked by in that.
I want to talk about Wisconsin for a little bit because I saw your back and forth there, with people about that, and I find it interesting that people who lose the game still have the audacity to talk trash.
It's
really. I mean, come on, you've lost and you're still talking smack. Come on, man.
It's a little different than it is. It's a little different than it is in Ohio because you guys have so many Division I programs that whenever the discussion about Ohio State or Cincinnati playing, mid-majors or, I don't even know if you guys even talk about low majors. If you ever, anytime I hear a discussion about that from people in Ohio, whether I'm looking through all the teams' message boards or anything, it always comes to, well, Ohio State doesn't play any of these teams enough. But in Wisconsin, we only have 4 Division I teams. So the argument really is Milwaukee, is Wisconsin playing Milwaukee in Milwaukee enough? Should Milwaukee and Marquette play? I mean, our arenas are right across the street from each other. And there was a stretch of about almost 15, I think it was like almost 18 years where we didn't play from the early 90s through through, was it 2007? I think our first game was, and that was a 5-year series that got canceled in the 5th year. The fifth game didn't happen. When they did come to our arena, they ended up escaping with a 3-point victory. When Wisconsin came to our arena a couple of years ago, about 4 years ago, they escaped with a 6-point victory. Last year, Wisconsin ended up beating us by 22 or something like that, but that's because our team was just down. It's hard for Milwaukee fans to really accept that Wisconsin and Marquette should automatically have these games that are, these series that are so lopsided. And I get the argument because Wisconsin and Marquette are top 15 nationally in attendance every year. Marquette hasn't had. I mean, they spend more than they achieve. They spend more than all but 3 teams in college basketball, and they don't achieve at a top 5 level. But Marquette still is. I mean, it's the Big East program. Wisconsin's the Big Ten. You understand that part of that dynamic, but it's hard because the argument really is, it's not does Wisconsin or Marquette play the mid-majors, it's how is the series with Milwaukee specifically. And for them, you'll never see them pass up a chance to call us Wisconsin Milwaukee or UW Milwaukee as kind of an affront to the program, just because it's them putting us in our place. That's be in your place. This is what you are. If we want to play 4 out of 5 years at the Kohl Center in Madison, you have to do it. If Marquette decides they don't want to play us when we're getting good, then they'll just buy out the contract and continue talking about how they're the most amazing thing in the world.
Forgetting the fact that they turn around then and complain that, well, we don't have enough quality wins, blah, blah, blah. And then, or we got bounced out of the conference. We got bounced out of the NCAA tournament early because blah, blah, blah. I mean, that's,
Right.
So it's like, don't cry. It's probably more magnified in Wisconsin, obviously, because, you have so few Division I teams. In Ohio, obviously, we've got Ohio State, the Cincinnati team, Cincinnati and Xavier.
11 or 12, I think, is what it is.
At least, yeah.
Because the MAC is like half in that state. You're first off, you're just such a bigger state than Wisconsin is to begin with.
Yeah.
I think we have 5 million people. I think you're 15 or 20 or something like that.
We don't have that many. Jesus.
Well, 11, maybe. You got a lot more electoral votes than we do. That's for sure.
Yes. But yeah, it's probably a different dynamic, but the idea of the scheduling kind of still remains the same. I mean, you talk about Ohio State. I mean, Cleveland State and Ohio State, Ohio State, and this is Ohio State will never play at the Wolstein Center ever. That I don't know why that is. I've never accepted that, but I'll be honest with you. After watching because Cleveland State now has a partnership with Quicken Loans Arena, so they are playing 5 of their games there. The Vikings are playing 5 of their games at Quicken Loans Arena.
Is that 5 games this season?
Yes. We played Kent State. Cleveland State played Kent State, Ohio, and then they're going to play in the Quicken Loans Arena. Valpo, Wright State, and for reasons that escape me, Youngstown State.
Really?
So, yeah.
That's gonna be a big draw.
You think? You know what? I've always lamented, and I'm probably gonna say, I will say this over and over again. The blood feud should be between Cleveland State and Youngstown State, but for so many years, Youngstown State has been so perennially awful that I can't consider them I want to so badly. I want to so badly consider them a rival, but they're not. They pull maybe 1 or 2 wins, pull 1 or 2 wins out that we never expected them to, or they beat us when we're having a down year, which may very well happen this year. But for the most part, no. I mean, we don't have the rivalry that say, Oakland and Detroit. I mean, you look at Oakland fans and Detroit fans right now. They got that crosstown, they've got that crosstown deal going on, and they are button heads, and I see the smack talk going back and forth between them all. I'm like, oh, wow, where's my guys?
Well, I think a big part of that is that Detroit wouldn't play Oakland forever. They kind of have the dynamic that we have with Marquette or Wright State has with Dayton, except Detroit was on the other side of it. Detroit was not willing to play Oakland, and then all of a sudden the rest of the conference is like, well, obviously this is the team that we're bringing in, much to Detroit's dismay.
I think they fought that for a lot of years before. I'm pretty sure they fought that for a lot of years before Oakland came up. I think that was a long Oakland coming into the Horizon League was a long time coming, and it probably should have happened a lot earlier, but not for.
Well, you were around in 2001, so I know the background. Do you know the background to the 2001 edition of Youngstown State?
I wish I remembered that. I just remember they magically showed up one day, and then
for our fans at home, the Horizon League fans that are listening to this program, the good thing is that I have somewhat of a good background on it. Now that pretty much all of the players are in the conference now, we can really have this discussion. Valparaiso was the first team that was supposed to come over to the newly christened Horizon League, and the athletic director at the time, his son, I don't know if it's still it was La Barbera back then, but the athletic director back in 2001 at Valpo, his son was actually the commissioner of what's now the Summit, the MidCon. And when Valpo got the offer, the last thing he wanted to do was tell his son, sorry, I'm leaving your conference that you've run. So Valpo stayed, and Oakland was considered, but Oakland was still a provisional D1 team. So we didn't know if they were going to be able to be there. So the Horizon League passed and went for Youngstown State, which has been nothing short of a disaster for the conference.
Well, let's hope then the mistakes that they made with Youngstown State, they do not repeat with Northern Kentucky, who just came in at the beginning of this year. So that's going to wrap it up for us. On behalf of Jimmy, this is Bob McDonald. You can catch us right at the beginning of the year every week on the Horizon Roundtable. We'll see you then.